Shares of Tesla sliding as the company prepares to report results after the bell. The EV maker experiencing a rocky start to the year in which it cut more than 10% of its headcount, and so its second quarter deliveries decline. Here with me at Post 9 to discuss what investors are focusing on and what lies ahead for the company is Wedbush's Dan Ives. You see there Tesla down 1%. So, Dan, year to date, it's actually kind of flat. It's been quite a ride. Yep. It goes down to 175 and pops back up to current levels. Over the course of the year so far, also because earnings estimates for the year have gone down, it's, stated PEs from like 65 above 80 now. Yep. So where does that leave us? I mean, what does the company have to show in order to convey that there's some progress on the important stuff?
I think two dynamics going on. One is the demand story, specifically in China. It's that turnaround. I think we saw it so far in 2Q. The big focus will be Musk talking about that second half of the year. And then the biggest thing, too, is pricing. I mean, you're talking about a company that, as we've talked about a lot, cut prices a lot the last year. Now you've seen a stabilization on prices. That's important in terms of the gross margin, call it 16.5%, 17%. But then the big reason the stock's up, it's about that AI robotics play. Robo-taxi day, I'd expect Musk to actually give a date. We'll call it early to mid-October. And these are the important things right now that have really been, I'll call it a bit of a renaissance of growth for the comeback kid, Tesla.
They're important things definitely for the stock and how it trades. I mean, how important, at least anytime soon, is that going to be for the company itself in a tangible way?
Yeah, I think from a stabilization, it's about EV demand. Demand clearly has started to stabilize. And you saw GM clearly pulling back a bit from an EV strategy. Tesla's doubling down. Do they talk about that sub $30,000 vehicle, call it in 2025? Do they give the roadmap to where you could look at 500,000 per quarter, get on that run rate to we'll see 2 million into 2025? Then investors, that stabilizes the story. And then really the cherry on top of the sundae, or really what could be the sundae, is the AI story, the robotics play, FSD, autonomous. That's really ultimately how you get to $1 trillion, $2 trillion valuation.
500,000 per quarter is like up 10% or so from here, we'll call it, right?
Yeah, and up better than down, right? I mean, that's the most important thing in terms of that trend that we're heading toward.
And what are the assumptions about overall EV demand, right? Because the whole story has been, sure, market share of Tesla is going to go from near 100% down to something else as everybody else rolls out EVs. But what's the overall pie growing at this point, or is it growing anymore?
Yeah, clearly slowed. I mean, you saw the boom come off the rose, and we've seen Detroit, in terms of GM, Ford pull back, others have pulled back. A lot of the startups have really fallen, off the cliff. Yeah. And that has led to Tesla gaining share, but China's really the story. I mean, China's the hearts and lungs of the Tesla story. Stabilization there, despite what we see BYD, NIO, and others. Yeah. That's going to be the key, showing that we're seeing strength in terms of the second half, but also stabilization from a gross margin. I'm sure LeBeau will talk about that in terms of where you feel like the worst is behind you. If that happens, that's also why right now a lot of bears, they're in those caves, not understanding what's happened in Tesla over the last 3 months. It's really now about that stabilization happening from Musk and Tesla.
When it comes to the policy piece of this, of course, Musk obviously very provocatively is out backing Donald Trump for president again. Kind of doesn't mind, or maybe thinks he'd be okay with getting rid of EV credits or whatever might happen in that scenario. How would that play through with Tesla's business?
Yeah, so if you think about the Trump trade, so if Trump ultimately got into the White House, the view is negative for EVs because the $7,500, the rebate would go away. Yeah. Negative for GM, Ford, Detroit. The reason bullish for Tesla, that would give them a price and scale advantage. The other thing it's viewed is that if Trump got in the White House, could that fast track FSD autonomous relative to what we're seeing in terms of playing out versus China? On the other hand, if you look at a Harris ticket, could that be pro-EV for Detroit, maybe anti-Tesla, just because it goes back to the view that Musk has really been a background noise under Biden administration and Trump administration? Is that something that'd be more front and center? And that's why I'd say Tesla's part of that Trump trade to some extent.
And when you say, the potential for fast-tracking full self-driving, is that because you feel as if, or the company feels as if, currently regulators are just very skeptical about permitting any of these, further rollouts?
Yeah, well, clearly a lot of noise around Tesla story, and a lot of it, warranted. But the regulatory environment. It's viewed, if a Trump White House, you maybe have less regulation, potentially could fast track, some of that FSD autonomous, depending where that goes for Tesla. But then it also speaks to what's happened in China. China is the opposite, where you're really seeing that kind of fifth gear in terms on the FSD autonomous side. And that's why I'd expect Musk to talk about the political race going into November tonight in the call. But no doubt, even though bullish Trump where he is, ironically negative for EVs. And that's all part of this Rubik's Cube that investors are trying to figure out.
Of how the competitive setup plays out. All right, Dan, good to see you.
Thank you.
Talk to you later.